Riverside Middle School in Atlanta was alive with its usual early morning energy. The sun was just beginning to stream through the windows, casting golden rays that lit up the classroom. Amidst the noise of students chatting and the scrape of chairs being moved, there sat Jamal Carter, quietly at the back of the room. He was always alone, lost in his thoughts, never really part of the chatter around him. Watch as the teacher's mockery quickly turns into admiration as the student solves the equation effortlessly. This story is a powerful reminder that intelligence isn't always measured by grades or outward appearances. Everyone has hidden potential. Watch till the end for more twists, and if it's your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Show some love by liking the video. At just 13 years old, Jamal was a figure that went unnoticed in his class. He never raised his hand, never asked questions, and rarely made eye contact. He had become a shadow, blending into the backdrop of the classroom. Jamal wasn't the kind of student who drew attention to himself. He was the kind of student that people forgot about, silent, distant, and seemingly indifferent. But what they didn't know was that Jamal Carter was a hidden genius, a boy with a mathematical mind far beyond his age. While his classmates struggled with basic equations, Jamal had already moved on to much more advanced topics. He was one of those rare individuals who didn't need to follow the curriculum to understand it. His mind was a repository of complex formulas and solutions that no one could comprehend. The truth about Jamal's life outside school was even more telling. His father, once a Navy SEAL captain, had struggled to find a stable job after retiring from the military. His mother worked tirelessly from morning to night, juggling cleaning houses, working at a supermarket, and sewing clothes to make ends meet. Jamal, as the oldest child, took on a lot of responsibilities. He cared for his younger brother, helped his mother with chores, and often worked odd jobs to help support the family. Yet despite all of this, Jamal still managed to excel in his own way. He didn't care about grades or accolades. His passion for learning and his quiet determination were what kept him going. However, being held back a year in school had made Jamal a target for mockery. His classmates whispered behind his back, laughing at him for being the kid who got held back. They thought he was just another lazy student, too slow to catch up with his peers. Little did they know that while they were laughing at his apparent lack of interest, Jamal had been teaching himself advanced mathematics from textbooks he borrowed during nights when he couldn't sleep. That morning, as Jamal sat at the back of the class, his mind was far away, as usual, drifting into a world of equations and calculations. He hadn't expected anything unusual that day. But life has a funny way of changing when you least expect it. Mrs. Amanda Thompson, the 8B math teacher, stood at the front of the class, a stack of graded tests in her hands. She was known for being strict and meticulous, qualities that had earned her the respect of her students, but also their fear. Mrs. Thompson had been teaching for over 2 decades and prided herself on seeing through the veil of her students' behaviors. She could tell who was working hard and who was slacking off. And Jamal, well, in her eyes, was someone who didn't care about his studies. Mrs. Thompson had watched Jamal from the beginning of the year. He was always sitting quietly at the back, staring out the window, never participating in class. To her, it seemed like he wasn't trying at all. So when she graded his test and saw that he had scored a perfect 100%, she was shocked. The test was flawless. Every problem solved with precision. Every step meticulously calculated. She had spent hours examining it, trying to find a mistake, a sign of cheating, anything that would explain the perfect score. But there was none. The answers were so well thought out, so methodically presented, that Mrs. Thompson couldn't believe her eyes. In her mind, Jamal had somehow fooled everyone. How could a student who had been so indifferent in class, who never spoke up, suddenly produce such a brilliant piece of work? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. To her, Jamal's behavior was an insult. He had been hiding his talent all along. If he was this good, why hadn't he shown it before? Her frustration reached its peak when she saw him again, sitting at the back of the room, gazing out the window. His usual aloof expression was back, but this time, Mrs. Thompson was no longer going to let him slip away unnoticed. She would confront him. "Jamal Carter," she called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "Come up here." The classroom fell silent as all eyes turned toward the back. Jamal froze. He had heard his name, but not in the way he was used to. This time, it wasn't from a classmate. This time, it was from Mrs. Thompson, and there was a tone in her voice that made his heart skip a beat. Jamal slowly stood up, his legs feeling like lead. The eyes of the entire class were on him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt exposed. He walked to the front of the classroom, his mind racing. He had no idea what was coming. But one thing was clear. Mrs. Thompson was about to challenge him in a way no teacher ever had before. "All right, Jamal," she said, her tone hard and unyielding. "If you're so good at math, prove it. Solve this problem." She wrote a complex equation on the whiteboard, one that was far beyond the level of what they had been learning in class. It was a test of not only his mathematical abilities, but also his ability to handle the pressure of being thrust into the spotlight. Jamal stood in front of the board, staring at the equation. The classroom was eerily quiet, every student holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Jamal felt the weight of their expectations, and for a moment, he was overwhelmed. But then something inside him clicked. He wasn't just solving a problem. He was showing the world who he truly was. His hands moved swiftly, and within moments, the entire equation was solved. His pen flew across the board, and with each step, he demonstrated the elegance of his mind, the brilliance that had been hidden for so long. When he finished, the class was silent. The problem, once thought to be impossible, was now solved. Perfectly. Mrs. Thompson stood there, stunned. She hadn't expected him to answer so quickly, so confidently. But there it was, the proof that Jamal wasn't just a quiet kid who had been held back. He was a genius. For the first time in his life, Jamal wasn't just another student in the back of the room. He was the one who had proven his worth. The applause that followed wasn't just for Jamal's answer. It was for the silent strength, the perseverance, and the brilliance that had been waiting to be seen. The room fell still. Every student's eyes flickered toward Jamal as Mrs. Thompson's sharp voice broke through the hum of the classroom. For the first time in his life, Jamal felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the whispers or mockery from his classmates. It wasn't the shame of being held back. It wasn't the isolation he'd gotten so used to. It was the pressure. Real, heavy pressure that Mrs. Thompson had just placed on him in front of the entire class. "Jamal Carter," she repeated, her voice cold and challenging. "Come to the board." 1,000 thoughts rushed through Jamal's mind, but none of them could keep him from standing up. His hands felt clammy as he stood from his desk, each step toward the front of the room as if the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. The laughter, the teasing, the doubts, those things had been a part of him for so long. But now it was something else. Mrs. Thompson had just forced him into the spotlight. She had dared him to show the world what he was capable of. The class was watching him closely, some with skepticism, others with a quiet expectation. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest, but as he walked toward the board, his mind shifted into a place of calm. The world around him began to blur, the hum of students turning into a distant noise. He knew this equation. He'd seen it 100 times in his quiet study sessions, working through problems that nobody else seemed to care about. He stepped up to the whiteboard, feeling the coldness of the marker in his hand. The equation that Mrs. Thompson had written was complex, an algebraic expression tangled with variables that seemed far beyond the ability of a 13-year-old. It was the kind of problem that would make most students freeze, but Jamal saw it for what it was. A challenge. "Let's see what you've got." Mrs. Thompson's words hung in the air, each syllable a provocation, as if daring him to fail. Jamal's first move was almost mechanical. He didn't hesitate. His hand moved fluidly as he started to break down the problem. transforming the tangled mess of numbers into something simple. Each step was deliberate, calculated. The chalk squeaked against the board, the sound sharp in the silence that enveloped the classroom. The students watched in awe as Jamal didn't just solve the problem. He dismantled it, showing a depth of understanding that most adults could only dream of. The room was still, so still that Jamal could hear his own breath. He knew the steps, knew the pattern of the numbers. He solved it as if it were second nature, the solution coming to him like a map he had already memorized in his mind. And then he finished. He stood back, marker still in hand, looking at the elegant solution he had written on the board. The silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't just that Jamal had solved the problem. It was the way he had done it. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. He had worked through the complex equation with the ease of someone who had been doing this for years, not a young boy who'd been mocked and misunderstood his whole life. Mrs. Thompson stood frozen, her eyes wide in disbelief. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The students stared at Jamal in shock, their previous laughter and skepticism replaced by awe. It was as though the entire classroom had been thrown into a new reality, where Jamal was no longer the quiet, invisible kid in the corner. He was a force, a presence, someone who had just turned everything they thought they knew about him upside down. Jamal's gaze never wavered from the board. His chest still pounded, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Pride. For the first time, Jamal felt like he had been seen. Not for his struggles, not for his circumstances, but for who he truly was. And that feeling, that was the real victory. The class stood in stunned silence, as if frozen in time. Mrs. Thompson's eyes were wide, her hands still hovering in the air, as if trying to grasp the impossible. The students, who had once sneered at Jamal for being different, now looked at him with something foreign, respect. The air was thick with disbelief and awe. Jamal had done it. He had taken a challenge, one designed to expose his flaws, and turned it into an undeniable victory. But in the quiet of that moment, something shifted inside Jamal. He realized it wasn't just the problem he had solved that made this moment significant. It was the power he had taken back from the world that had constantly doubted him. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. This was about proving something to himself. Jamal stood there, marker still in hand, as the weight of the room pressed down on him. But instead of feeling like the eyes on him were heavy, he felt light. For the first time in his life, he didn't just belong in that space. He owned it. Mrs. Thompson was the first to speak, but her voice had lost its usual sharpness. It was almost reverent. I never expected that, Jamal. You've shown us all something today. Well done. Jamal didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. Words could not capture the depth of what he had just experienced. There was nothing more to say. The equation was solved, the challenge met, but the lesson was far greater than that. It wasn't about numbers or letters on a board. It wasn't about a classroom or the expectations others had placed on him. It was about the fact that, in that instant, Jamal had rewritten his own story. For years, he had been told he didn't belong. For years, his intelligence had been dismissed, his potential ignored. But in that quiet, powerful moment, he proved something that no one could ever take away from him. He was capable of greatness, regardless of what the world had said. As he turned to sit back down at his desk, a strange thing happened. One by one, the students who had once looked down on him now started to clap. First, it was just a few tentative claps, unsure and awkward. But then it grew louder, stronger. Jamal couldn't believe his eyes. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't mocking him. They were acknowledging him. His intellect, his strength, his quiet resolve. And just like that, Jamal's world changed. The days that followed weren't easy. No one expected things to turn around overnight, but Jamal didn't need overnight miracles. What he needed was to keep proving to himself, to keep showing up, and to keep believing in his own power. Every small victory, every problem solved, no matter how big or small, was another step toward his transformation. He didn't wait for others to validate him. He validated himself. But the real change came when he realized that his journey wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Jamal knew he wasn't alone in his struggle. There were other kids in that classroom, in that school, and in the world who felt like they didn't have a voice, didn't have a chance. And Jamal's victory became their victory too. He made a promise to himself that day. No matter where life took him, he would always fight to lift others up, to create spaces where people weren't judged by their circumstances, but by their potential. He would be the voice for the voiceless, and the strength for those who needed it most. The world wasn't going to change overnight, but Jamal Carter, the quiet, underestimated boy who once struggled in the shadows, was going to lead the way, one challenge at a time. And as the years passed, Jamal's story became one of inspiration. He was no longer the student who sat in the back, hoping to remain invisible. He was the one standing in the front, daring others to step up, to rise, and to claim their own power. In a world that loves to categorize and label, Jamal had discovered that true strength lies not in fitting the mold, but in breaking it. It lies in finding your own voice, no matter how quiet it may seem at first. Jamal Carter didn't just solve an equation that day. He solved the equation of his life. And that was just the beginning. So never let the world define you. Don't let the labels others place on you become your truth. You are more than the sum of your circumstances. In the face of doubt, in the face of adversity, there is power in choosing to rise above. Every challenge is an opportunity to redefine who you are. Your greatest strength lies in your ability to push through when the world expects you to fail. So the next time someone doubts your potential, the next time they try to tell you who you are or what you can't do, remember this. You are capable of greatness. You hold the power to rewrite your story. Step into it.